The security cameras showed nothing unusual at first. Taemin watched the monitors from his desk, drinking cold coffee and fighting off sleep. It was 3 in the morning on Harmony Point Station and the hallways were empty. Most of the crew slept during these quiet hours. Only a few workers moved through the distant corridors, their shapes small on the screens. Then something flickered near the observation deck. A small shadow, then another. Taemin leaned forward and squinted at the screen. The shadows moved again, quick and low to the ground. They disappeared behind a support beam. Taemin stood up and grabbed his scanner. He left the security office and walked down the main corridor. His boots made soft sounds on the metal floor. The station hummed around him, alive with the constant noise of air recyclers and power systems. He had worked here for 2 years and knew every sound. The observation deck was dark except for the starlight coming through the large windows. Taemin turned on his flashlight and swept it across the room. Empty chairs sat in rows facing the windows. The view showed endless space and distant stars. Nothing moved, then he heard it. A small chirping sound like a bird, but different, softer, almost musical. The sound came from behind the ventilation grate near the floor. Taemin knelt down and shined his light at the grate. 3 pairs of eyes reflected back at him, glowing blue in the darkness. The chirping stopped. The eyes disappeared deeper into the vent. He pressed the button on his communication device. "This is Taemin. I found them. Observation deck near vent access point 7. Within minutes, 2 Velthran adults arrived. They were tall and slender, covered in short fur that sparkled like tiny crystals under the lights. Their fur shifted colors, showing worry in shades of deep purple and gray. The female, Vethra, moved toward the vent and spoke in her language. It sounded like wind chimes and whispers mixed together. No response came from the vent. The male, Colvin, tried next. He made clicking sounds and gentle calls. Still nothing. "They ran from nursery 3 hours ago," Vethra explained in standard language, her voice tight with stress. "We cannot reach them. They fear everything now. The diplomatic meetings, the new place, too many strange beings. They hide." Station Commander Park arrived, looking tired. She wore her uniform jacket over sleep clothes. "We need to get them out safely. They could damage systems in there or hurt themselves." "Let me try," Colvin said. He reached toward the vent grate. The chirping turned to sharp squeaking. Small claws scratched against metal, moving away fast. Commander Park shook her head. "We need someone they don't see as a threat. Someone calm and quiet." That was when Jiwoo appeared at the doorway. He carried a tool bag over his shoulder and held a datapad showing the station systems. He stopped when he saw the group gathered around the vent. "I got a call about a ventilation issue in this sector," Jiwoo said quietly. He was young, maybe 25, with dark hair falling over his eyes. He looked tired, like he always did during night shifts. "Wait," Commander Park said. She moved between Jiwoo and the vent. "There are Velthran cubs in there. They're frightened. We're trying to coax them out." Jiwoo nodded and set down his tool bag. He did not say anything else. He simply sat on the floor near the vent, not too close, and opened his datapad. The blue light from the screen lit his face as he began working on something. "What are you doing?" Taemin asked. "Checking the system," Jiwoo answered without looking up. "Making sure everything's working right in there. Temperature, airflow, pressure. Making sure they're safe." 10 minutes passed. The adults whispered to each other. Taemin watched the vent carefully. Commander Park checked her messages. Jiwoo kept working on his pad, occasionally making notes. He hummed softly under his breath, not a song exactly, just a low sound. A tiny nose appeared at the edge of the vent grate, then a face, small and covered in crystalline fur that shimmered between blue and silver. Large eyes watched Jiwoo. No one moved. No one spoke. Another face appeared beside the first. Then a third. 3 small cubs, each no bigger than a house cat, pressed against the grate. Their fur rippled with colors, mostly pale green with hints of yellow. Jiwoo glanced up from his pad. "Hello," he said softly. Then he went back to his work. The boldest cub, the first to appear, chirped once. Jiwoo looked up again and tilted his head. "The air in there is a bit warm. I can fix that if you want." He spoke like he was talking to adults, not using baby words. He reached slowly into his tool bag and pulled out a small device. He adjusted something on it, and cool air began flowing from the vent. The cub's fur shifted to brighter colors, green and light blue. "Better?" Jiwoo asked. The bold cub chirped again. It sounded different this time, more curious than scared. "I'm Jiwoo. I fix things on the station." mostly at night when it's quiet. He kept his voice low and even. You can stay in there if you feel safe. I just want to make sure nothing breaks. The second cub, smaller and shyer, made a sound like a question. That's Dal, Vethra whispered to Commander Park. The curious one. The small one is Bomb. The youngest is Hanul. Jiwoo pulled out a ration bar from his pocket and broke off a small piece. He ate it slowly, not looking at the cubs. He broke off another piece and held it near the vent. Not too close, just within reach. Nothing happened for a long moment. Then Dal's small paw reached through the grate. Tiny claws extended, grabbed the food, and pulled it back inside. Chirping sounds followed, happy ones. Jiwoo broke off 2 more pieces and placed them near the grate. There's enough for everyone, he said. Commander Park stepped forward. Jiwoo, do you think you could help us with this situation? Jiwoo looked up, confused. Help how? The cubs trust you. Their parents need to attend important diplomatic meetings for the next few days. We need someone to watch them, keep them safe, help them adjust to the station. The commander spoke carefully, like she was offering something difficult. I don't know anything about taking care of kids, Jiwoo said. He looked at the vent where 6 glowing eyes watched him. I fix machines, not... Please, Vethra said. You are the first person they have shown interest in since we arrived. They sense something good in you. Something safe. Jiwoo was quiet for a moment. He looked at his tool bag, then at his datapad, then back at the cubs. Dal had moved closer to the grate. The cub's fur showed warm orange and gold colors now. Okay, Jiwoo finally said. I'll try, but I don't know what I'm doing. None of us do when we start, Colvin said with what might have been a smile. You simply care and learn. That is enough. 2 hours later, Jiwoo had coaxed all 3 cubs out of the vent. They followed him to a quiet room in the residential section, chirping softly and staying close to his legs. He set up soft blankets in one corner and placed water and food nearby. The cubs explored cautiously, always keeping Jiwoo in sight. When he sat down on the floor, they gathered around him. Dal climbed onto his lap, Bomb pressed against his side. Hanul curled up near his feet. Their crystalline fur glowed soft blue in the dim light. Jiwoo looked down at the 3 small beings who had decided to trust him. He felt completely out of his depth. He was just a maintenance worker who preferred machines to people. What did he know about caring for alien children? But when Dal looked up at him and chirped softly, something in his chest felt warm. He placed his hand gently on the cub's head, careful of the delicate crystalline fur. We'll figure this out together, he whispered. Outside the room, Timon watched through the door's small window. He smiled and made a note in his report. Sometimes the best person for a job was the one who never expected to do it. The first morning was chaos. Jiwoo woke to find Dal sitting on his chest, staring directly at his face. The cub's crystalline fur sparkled with bright yellow and pink colors. When Jiwoo opened his eyes, Dal chirped loudly and bounced up and down. Good morning to you too, Jiwoo mumbled. His back hurt from sleeping on the floor. He had given the cubs the bed, but they had dragged all the blankets down to where he lay and slept around him instead. Bomb and Hanul were awake too, running in circles around the small room. They made sounds that were half chirping and half something like laughter. Every few seconds, they crashed into each other and tumbled across the floor. Jiwoo sat up slowly. His head felt heavy and his eyes burned from lack of sleep. The cubs had woken him 5 times during the night, scared of shadows or strange sounds or nothing at all. Each time, he had calmed them with soft words and gentle touches until they settled back down. He checked the time. 6 in the morning. His shift ended at 8, which meant he had been awake for almost 24 hours. He needed to get the cubs fed, cleaned, and settled before he could rest. The station cafeteria was crowded when Jiwoo arrived with 3 small Velthrin cubs trailing behind him. Conversation stopped. People stared. A Karathi trader dropped his tray. Jiwoo ignored the attention and moved to the food dispensers. He had no idea what Velthrin cubs ate. The station database said they were omnivores who could digest most standard proteins and plant matter. But it did not say what they preferred or how much they needed. He selected small portions of different foods and carried them to an empty table in the corner. The cubs jumped onto the chairs, standing on their back legs to see the table better. Their heads barely reached the surface. Dal sniffed each item carefully. The cub's nose twitched and its fur changed colors with each new smell. green for the vegetables, purple for the protein cubes, bright blue for something sweet. Bomb watched Dal, waiting to see what the bold cub would choose. Hanul just chirped and tried to climb onto the table. Jiwoo picked up Hanul and set the cub back on the chair. "You have to stay seated," he said quietly. "That's the rule." Hanul's fur turned dark gray and the small cub made a sad sound. I know, Jiwoo said. He broke off a piece of the sweet food and offered it to Hanul. "But rules keep you safe." The youngest cub took the food and the gray faded back to happier colors. Sang-woo, one of the security guards, approached their table. He was older than Jiwoo and had worked on the station for 10 years. "How's it going?" he asked. "I have no idea what I'm doing," Jiwoo admitted. He watched as Dal tried to eat everything at once while Bomb only nibbled at the vegetables. "You're doing better than the last person who tried to watch Velthrin young," Sang-woo said. "Those cubs ran wild through the cargo bay for 3 hours before their parents caught them." "You got them sitting at a table eating breakfast. That's progress." Jiwoo did not feel like it was progress. He felt tired and confused. But the cubs were eating and they seemed happy, so maybe Sang-woo was right. The days that followed fell into a pattern. Jiwoo learned by watching. He noticed that when the cubs' fur turned certain colors, they needed certain things. Dark blue meant they were cold. Red meant they were upset or angry. Soft green meant they were content. Purple meant they were scared. He also learned that they did not like loud noises or sudden movements. They preferred small quiet spaces to large open ones. They needed to run and play for at least 2 hours each day, or they became restless and difficult. Most importantly, he learned that they watched everything he did and tried to copy it. One afternoon, Jiwoo was organizing his tools in the small quarters. He laid them out in neat rows grouped by function. When he finished and stepped back, he found the cubs doing the same thing with their toys. Dal lined up small blocks in careful rows. Bomb sorted different colored balls by shade. Hanel tried to stack cushions from smallest to largest. Jiwoo stared at them in surprise. He had not asked them to do this. They had simply watched him and decided to try it themselves. "That's really good," he said softly. "You're all doing a great job." The cub's fur brightened with warm colors. They chirped happily and continued their work. Later that week, Hye-jin from engineering stopped by to check on a power coupling near Jiwoo's quarters. She was a friend, or at least someone who talked to him sometimes during shifts. She found Jiwoo sitting on the floor with the cubs, showing them how to care for a small plant in a pot. "You're teaching them gardening?" she asked, surprised. "Just showing them how to water it," Jiwoo explained. "Not too much or the roots rot. Just enough to keep it healthy." Dal held the watering cup carefully, tipping it slowly like Jiwoo had demonstrated. "Only a little water spilled." "I heard you were watching the Velthrin cubs, but I didn't believe you'd be good at it," Hye-jin said. She sat down near them. "You barely talk to other humans." "They don't judge me for being quiet," Jiwoo said. "And they don't ask questions I don't know how to answer." Bomb brought Hye-jin a toy, offering it shyly. When she took it, the cub's fur turned happy yellow. "They really like you," Hye-jin observed. "I heard Dal bit a Karathi diplomat last week when he tried to pick the cub up. But they let you carry them around like it's nothing." Jiwoo shrugged. "I don't grab them. I ask first, and I wait for them to come to me." "Patience," Hye-jin said. "That's the difference. Most beings don't have enough of it, but patience had its limits." By the end of the second week, Jiwoo felt exhausted in a way sleep could not fix. He still worked his full shifts, then watched the cubs during the day. He managed maybe 4 hours of sleep if he was lucky. His hands shook sometimes when he held his tools. His head hurt most days. He was repairing a panel in the cubs' quarters when the dizziness hit. The room tilted sideways. He grabbed the wall to steady himself, but his vision went blurry at the edges. "I'm okay," he said to no one in particular. "Just tired," Dal chirped with concern. The cub's fur turned dark blue and gray. Bomb and Hanul stopped playing and came closer, their colors also shifting to worried shades. "I'm fine," Jiwoo repeated. He sat down on the floor and took slow breaths. "Just need a minute." The cubs pressed against him, making soft sounds. They did not understand human words exactly, but they understood tone and feeling. They knew something was wrong. After a few minutes, the dizziness passed. Jiwoo finished his work and fed the cubs their dinner. He did not mention the episode to anyone. He told himself it was just exhaustion. Once Vethra and Kolvan returned from their diplomatic mission, he could go back to his normal quiet life and sleep for a week. That evening, Minho stopped by during his security rounds. He was younger than Sang-woo and still learning his job. He found Ji-woo teaching the cubs a game with colored cards. You match the same colors together, Ji-woo explained, demonstrating with 2 blue cards. See, blue with blue, red with red. Hanul grabbed a yellow card and placed it with another yellow card, chirping triumphantly. Good job, Ji-woo said. His voice sounded rough and he coughed to clear it. You sound sick, Minho observed. I'm fine, just tired. You've been saying that a lot lately, Minho said. Maybe you should go to medical. After the cubs' parents come back, Ji-woo promised. Only 3 more days. But 3 days felt very far away when Ji-woo laid down that night and felt his body shake with exhaustion. The cubs curled up around him like they always did, their warm bodies pressed close. Dal rested a small paw on Ji-woo's arm. Bomb made soft, sleepy sounds. Hanel's fur glowed faintly in the darkness. Ji-woo closed his eyes and let the tiredness pull him under. He did not notice that his skin felt too warm or that his breathing sounded wrong. He did not notice the cubs' fur turning darker colors as they sensed something their friend could not. He just slept, deep and heavy, while 3 small beings kept watch over him in the quiet night. Ji-woo woke to voices arguing above him. His eyes felt heavy like someone had placed weights on his eyelids. His whole body ached and he could not remember why. Temperature is 39.4 degrees, someone said. A woman's voice, professional and calm. That's a significant fever for humans. How long has he been like this? Another voice, male and worried. The cubs alerted us 6 hours ago. They wouldn't stop chirping outside the security office until someone followed them here. Ji-woo tried to open his eyes. The light hurt. Everything was too bright and too loud. He felt hands touching his forehead, his neck, checking his pulse. Ji-woo, can you hear me? The woman's face appeared above him. She wore medical whites. Her name badge said Dr. Kyung-soo. You're very sick. We need to move you to Medical Bay. The cubs, Ji-woo whispered. His throat felt like broken glass. Who's watching them? They're right here, Kyung-soo said. They won't leave your side. Ji-woo turned his head slowly. 3 small shapes sat pressed against the wall, their crystalline fur dark purple and gray. Dal's eyes were wide and scared. Bomb trembled. Hanul made small, sad sounds. It's okay, Ji-woo tried to say, but his voice barely worked. I'm okay. He was not okay. Kyung-soo ran tests and scans and discovered a bacterial infection in Ji-woo's lungs and bloodstream. He had caught it 2 weeks ago while repairing old panels in the station's lower sections. The bacteria was rare but dangerous, especially when left untreated. You should have come to medical the moment you felt sick, Kyung-soo said sternly. She prepared an injection of strong medicine. This infection could have killed you. I had to watch the cubs, Ji-woo said. He laid in the medical bay bed, connected to machines that beeped steadily. No one else could do it. And now you can't watch them at all because you're too sick to stand, Kyung-soo replied. That's not heroic. That's foolish, she was right. But Ji-woo did not have energy to argue. The medicine made him drowsy. His eyes kept closing even though he tried to stay awake. The cubs sat in chairs near his bed, brought there by Sang-woo, who felt bad for them. They had not eaten since Ji-woo collapsed. They just watched him with sad eyes and dark-colored fur. Commander Park came to check on the situation. She stood at the end of Ji-woo's bed and looked concerned. The Velthran parents are still 2 days away. We need someone else to watch the cubs and they won't go with anyone else, Sang-woo said. He had tried to lead them away earlier, but they had bitten him and run back to Ji-woo's side. They can't stay in medical, Kyung-soo said firmly. This is a sterile environment and they're touching everything. Please, Ji-woo managed to say. Let them stay. They're scared. Kyung-soo looked at him, then at the cubs, then sighed. Fine. But they stay in the corner and don't interfere with treatment. The argument continued above Ji-woo's head, but he stopped listening. The medicine pulled him down into deep sleep. He heard voices like they were far away, felt movement around him but could not wake up enough to respond. When he next opened his eyes, he was in a different room. Not the busy medical bay, but a private recovery room. The lights were dim. Machines still beeped around him, but quieter now. The cubs were there, of course. They sat in a small huddle near his bed, whispering to each other in their musical language. When Dal noticed Ji-woo's eyes were open, all 3 rushed to the bedside. Hey, Ji-woo whispered. His voice sounded slightly better. Sorry I scared you. The cubs chirped and made sounds that were almost like crying. Their small paws reached through the bed rails, trying to touch him. Jiwoo moved his hand so they could reach it. Their paws were warm and soft. He felt their tiny claws gently grip his fingers. "I'll be okay," he promised. "The medicine is working. I just need to sleep a lot," and he did sleep. The infection had damaged his body badly, and rest was the only cure now. Kyung-soo said he would need at least 4 days of deep sleep cycles for his system to heal properly. The cubs refused to leave. They accepted food from Sang-woo but only ate small amounts. They took turns sleeping, so at least one was always awake, watching Jiwoo with worried eyes. On the second night, Minho was doing his rounds when he noticed something strange. He stopped at Jiwoo's door and stared through the window. Then he pressed his communication device. "Sang-woo, you need to see this." Sang-woo arrived 5 minutes later. He looked through the window and his eyes went wide. "What are they doing?" Inside the room, the cubs were gathering materials. Dal dragged a soft blanket from the storage cabinet. Bomb pulled cushions from the chairs. Hanul tried to move a pillow twice the cub's size. They worked with surprising focus, carrying items to Jiwoo's bed. Dal climbed onto a chair and carefully arranged the blanket along one side of the bed. Bomb positioned cushions at the foot. Hanul pushed the pillow against the other side. "They're building something," Minho said. "But what?" Sang-woo watched as the cubs continued their work. They moved with purpose, like they had a plan only they understood. Over the next hours, the cubs gathered more materials. They took thermal sheets from the medical supply closet. They found soft foam padding used for injury treatment. They even dragged in a heating unit designed for cold-sensitive species. The security guards watched through the window, fascinated. The cubs tested everything they placed, pressing on it with their paws to make sure it was stable. They adjusted positions multiple times until satisfied. They worked together, chirping instructions to each other. By morning, they had created something remarkable. Jiwoo slept in the center of a carefully constructed barrier. Soft materials surrounded him on all sides, forming a protective circle. The heating unit provided gentle warmth. Extra blankets created layers of comfort and insulation. Everything was arranged with precision and care. "It's a nest," a new voice said. Everyone turned. Vethra and Colvin stood in the hallway, having arrived early from their diplomatic mission. They had heard about Jiwoo's illness and rushed back. "A nest?" Commander Park asked. She had arrived for morning rounds. "A guardian nest," Vethra explained. Her voice shook with emotion. Velthrin cubs build them instinctively for family members who are sick or injured. It provides warmth, protection, and comfort during healing. "But Jiwoo isn't Velthrin," Kyung-soo said. "No," Colvin agreed. He looked through the window at his children, who were now curled up sleeping around Jiwoo's bed, exhausted from their night of work. "He is not. But they have claimed him as family anyway. This is their way of showing it." "I've never heard of Velthrin cubs doing this for another species," Commander Park said quietly. "Because it has never happened before," Vethra replied. "The nest-building instinct is sacred to our people. Cubs only do it for those they love deeply, those they consider true kin." Sang-woo felt something in his chest tighten. He looked at Jiwoo, unconscious and unaware of the honor being given to him. The quiet maintenance worker who just wanted to help, who never asked for recognition or reward, who cared for 3 scared cubs simply because they needed someone. "Should we remove the materials?" Kyung-soo asked. "Some of them aren't approved for patient rooms." "No," Vethra said firmly. "The nest stays. It will help him heal. Velthrin cubs have instincts older than our civilization. They know what they are doing." That afternoon, Heejin visited with other crew members who wanted to see. They stood quietly at the window, watching the small cubs sleep in protective positions around their human friend. Word spread through the station quickly. The maintenance worker and the cubs. The nest built from love. Inside the room, Jiwoo remained deep in healing sleep. He did not know that he was surrounded by more than just blankets and cushions. He was surrounded by something much more valuable. 3 small beings had decided he was worth protecting. They had worked through the night using skills he had taught them to build something beautiful. Dal woke first and checked on Jiwoo. The cub touched the human's hand gently, feeling for warmth and life. Finding both, Dal's fur shifted to pale green, peaceful and content. The cub adjusted a blanket that had slipped slightly, then returned to the nest they had built. Outside, Taemin arrived to see what everyone was talking about. He looked through the window for a long time, not saying anything. Finally, he smiled and made a note in his report. Human Jiwoo remains in recovery, he wrote, protected by 3 Velthran cubs who have adopted him as family. The nest they built is the most remarkable thing I have seen in 10 years of station service. Sometimes the best bonds form in the most unexpected ways. The morning light filtered through the window of Jiwoo's recovery room, soft and gentle. He opened his eyes slowly, feeling different than before, less heavy, less sick. His head did not pound, and his body did not ache as badly. Then he noticed the nest. At first, he thought he was still dreaming. Soft materials surrounded him, carefully arranged in layers. Thermal blankets created warm barriers. Cushions supported his body at perfect angles. A low heating unit hummed nearby, set to exactly the right temperature. Everything was positioned with precision and care. 3 small Velthran cubs slept in a circle around him. Dal rested near his head, one paw stretched out to touch Jiwoo's hair. Bomb curled against his side. Hanel slept at his feet, tiny body rising and falling with steady breaths. "What?" Jiwoo started to say, but his voice cracked from disuse. The cubs woke instantly. Their fur brightened with happy colors, yellows and golds and bright blues. They chirped and made joyful sounds, climbing carefully onto the nest to get closer to him. "Hey," Jiwoo said softly. He reached out to touch each of them. "What did you do here?" The door opened and Kyungsoo entered with Vethra and Kolven. The Velthran parents moved quickly to the bedside, their fur showing relief in warm orange shades. "You are awake," Vethra said. "We were very worried. How long was I asleep?" Jiwoo asked. 3 days, Kyungsoo replied. She checked the medical monitors and nodded with satisfaction. "Your fever broke 12 hours ago. The infection is responding well to treatment." Jiwoo looked around at the nest again. "Did you build this?" he asked the medical staff. "No," Kolven said. He gestured to the cubs. "Our children built it. They worked through 2 nights to create it properly." Jiwoo stared at Dal, Bom, and Hanul. The cubs watched him with bright eyes, their fur rippling with proud colors. "You built this?" "For me?" Jiwoo felt something tight in his chest, an emotion he could not name. "It is a guardian nest," Vethra explained. "In Velthran culture, it is the highest honor. Cubs build them only for those they love as true family. They gathered materials, tested stability, ensured proper temperature control. They used everything you taught them about organization and problem solving." Jiwoo touched the thermal blanket near his hand. The fabric was soft and warm. He noticed how every element of the nest served a purpose. The cushions prevented pressure points. The blankets trapped heat without causing overheating. The placement allowed easy movement while providing security. "I don't understand," Jiwoo said quietly. "I just watched them for a few weeks. I'm not their family." "You are," Kolven said firmly. "You cared for them when they were frightened. You taught them patience and kindness. You showed them how to organize their world and solve problems. You gave them safety and understanding. That is family." Dal chirped and pressed against Jiwoo's hand. The cub's crystalline fur glowed bright gold. "They would not eat properly while you were sick," Vethra added. "They refused to leave your side. They stood guard, taking turns sleeping so someone always watched you. When you needed protection, they built this nest using every skill you taught them." Jiwoo felt tears gathering in his eyes. He had never been good with emotions or relationships. He preferred machines and quiet work. But these 3 small beings had decided he was worth loving. They had worked through the night to keep him safe. "Thank you," he whispered to the cubs. "Thank you for taking care of me." The cubs responded with happy chirps and gentle sounds. They pressed closer, careful not to hurt him but needing to be near. Later that day, Da-un from the science division came to observe. She was a xenobiologist who studied interspecies behavior. She stood in the doorway with her datapad making notes. "This is remarkable," she said. "I've studied Velthran nesting behaviors for years, but I've never seen them extend it to another species. The cubs recognized you as family at such a deep level that their instincts accepted you completely." "What does that mean exactly?" Jiwoo asked. He sat propped up in the nest, feeling stronger each hour. "It means their behavior toward you is identical to how they would treat a Velthran parent or sibling," Da-un explained. "They assess your needs, respond to your emotions, and protect you as one of their own. This level of cross-species bonding is extremely rare. Ambassador Seonmi arrived next. She was responsible for diplomatic relations on the station and had worked with the Velthran government for years." She looked at the nest with wonder. "Do you understand what this represents?" she asked Jiwoo. The Velthran place enormous cultural significance on nest building. When word of this spreads, it will change how your species and theirs interact forever. I just took care of some kids who needed help, Jiwoo said, uncomfortable with the attention. You did more than that, Seonmi replied. You showed that humans and Velthran can form bonds that transcend biological differences. You proved that patience and compassion work across species lines. Jiwoo did not feel like he had proved anything. He had simply tried his best with 3 scared cubs. He had treated them like they mattered, like their feelings were important. That seemed basic, not revolutionary. But as more visitors came throughout the day, he began to understand the impact. Station workers stopped by to see the nest. Other species representatives asked questions about human childcare methods. Everyone wanted to know how a quiet maintenance worker had achieved what diplomats and specialists could not. Young-soo, the station counselor, spent an hour observing the cubs interact with Jiwoo. He made detailed notes about their communication patterns and emotional responses. The cubs mirror your emotional regulation, Young-soo explained. When you stay calm, they stay calm. When you speak gently, they respond gently. You taught them by example, without realizing you were teaching at all. That evening, as visiting hours ended and the room grew quiet, Jiwoo finally had time alone with the cubs and their parents. Vethra and Kolvin sat near the nest watching their children with obvious pride. We must return to our diplomatic work tomorrow, Vethra said, but we cannot take the cubs yet. They need more time to adjust and feel secure. I can still watch them, Jiwoo offered immediately. Once I'm released from medical, I mean. Kolvin and Vethra exchanged glances. Their fur rippled with colors that Jiwoo was learning to read. Appreciation, respect, and something deeper. We would be honored, Kolvin said, but you must promise to rest when you need rest. To ask for help when you need help. Our children love you, but they need you healthy. I promise, Jiwoo said. He meant it this time. Dal climbed into his lap and made soft sounds. Bom brought him water without being asked. Hanul arranged the blankets more comfortably around him. They worked together, taking care of their friend the way he had taken care of them. They have learned so much from you, Vethra observed. Not just skills, but values. They learned that being gentle is not being weak, that patience achieves more than force, that caring for others brings its own reward. Jiwoo watched the cubs fuss over him, their small paws adjusting his nest with serious concentration. I learned from them too, he admitted. I learned that I can connect with others, that I have something to offer beyond fixing machines, that maybe I'm not as alone as I thought I was. You are definitely not alone, a voice said from the doorway. Heejin stood there with Sangwoo, Taemin, and Minho. They carried food and supplies. We figured you might be tired of medical rations, Heejin said, so we brought real food. And some things for the cubs. The security guards set up a small gathering in Jiwoo's room. They shared stories and laughed quietly. The cubs played with new toys, their fur bright with happiness. For the first time in his life, Jiwoo felt like part of a community. He looked around at the people who had come to visit him, at the cubs who had built him a nest, at the parents who trusted him with their children, at the friends he had not realized he had made. This is nice, he said softly. Yes, Vethra agreed. This is what family feels like. Not just biology, but choice. You chose to care for our children. They chose to love you. That is family in its truest form. As the evening wore on and visitors left, Jiwoo settled back into his nest. The cubs curled around him, their breathing slow and peaceful. He placed his hands on Dal and Bom gently, feeling their warmth and steady heartbeats. He thought about all the years he had spent alone, believing he was not good with people or relationships. He had been wrong. He just needed to find the right people to connect with in the right way. Sometimes family found you when you least expected it. Sometimes it came in forms you never imagined. 3 small aliens with crystalline fur and big hearts. They had decided he was worth loving, worth protecting, worth building a nest around. Jiwoo closed his eyes and smiled. For the first time in a very long time, he felt completely at peace. 2 weeks after waking in the nest, Jiwoo stood in the station's cultural center and stared at a display case. Inside sat a carefully preserved section of the nest the cubs had built. Soft blankets, thermal sheets, and cushions arranged with obvious care and purpose. A small sign explained what it represented. Guardian nest built by Velthran cubs Dal, Bom, and Hanul for human Jiwoo during his illness. First recorded instance of cross-species nest-building behavior. symbol of interspecies kinship and the universal nature of compassion. People stopped to look at it throughout the day. Some took pictures. Others simply stood quietly, thinking about what it meant. Jiwoo found it embarrassing, but Commander Park had insisted the display was important for cultural education. "How are you feeling?" Kyung-soo asked, appearing beside him. She had been monitoring his recovery closely. "Better," Jiwoo said. It was true. The infection was gone, his strength had returned, and he no longer needed daily medical checks. Ready to go back to work. "Half shifts only for another week," Kyung-soo reminded him sternly. "And no lifting heavy equipment," Jiwoo nodded. He knew better than to argue with her. The cubs had adjusted well to his recovery routine. They still stayed with him in his quarters, but now they had more space and better accommodations. Vethra and Colvin had extended their diplomatic assignment, which meant the cubs could remain on the station longer. But something had changed. The cubs no longer needed constant supervision. They had learned structure and routine from Jiwoo. They understood station rules and followed them without being reminded. They played safely, ate properly, and even helped clean up their toys. "You did well with them," Vethra had said during her last visit. "You gave them skills they will carry their whole lives." Jiwoo did not feel like he had done anything special. He had just spent time with them, taught them what he knew, and treated them with respect. But apparently that was enough. The real surprise came 3 days later when Ambassador Seonmi called Jiwoo to her office. He arrived nervous, wondering if he had done something wrong. "Sit down," she said, gesturing to a chair. "You're not in trouble." Actually, quite the opposite. Jiwoo sat carefully. The cubs had wanted to come with him, but he had convinced them to stay with Sang-woo for the morning. "The Velthran government has been in contact," Seonmi explained. "They've heard about what happened with the cubs and the nest. They're very impressed." "I didn't do it for recognition," Jiwoo said quickly. "I know. That's part of why they're impressed." Seonmi pulled up a document on her screen. "They want to establish a formal exchange program between humans and Velthran. Cultural education, childcare methods, interspecies understanding. They've asked specifically for human advisors who demonstrate the kind of patience and care you showed." Jiwoo felt his stomach tighten. "I'm not an advisor. I fix machines." "You're someone who understands that connection matters more than species," Seonmi corrected. "That's rarer than you think." Other species had noticed too. A Karathi family with young children had requested human caretakers after seeing how Jiwoo handled the cubs. A Threxian delegation asked for workshops on human approaches to childcare and education. Everyone wanted to learn what this quiet maintenance worker knew. Jiwoo found himself teaching small classes in the evenings. He felt awkward standing in front of groups explaining things that seemed obvious to him. "Be patient. Listen more than you talk. Let children explore safely. Respect their feelings even when they're small." But people took notes like he was sharing profound wisdom. Maybe to them it was. One evening, as he finished a class about building trust with scared children, a Threxian parent approached him. Her translator device rendered her clicking speech into standard language. "My daughter has been afraid since we arrived at station," she said. "Afraid of new beings, new places, everything. I tried forcing her to adapt. It only made things worse." "What helped?" Jiwoo asked. "I did what you suggested. I sat with her. I let her approach new things at her own pace. I stopped pushing." The Threxian's mandibles clicked in what might have been a smile. "Yesterday she made her first friend here. A human child from the residential section." Jiwoo felt warmth spread through his chest. "That's wonderful. You changed how I see my role as a parent," the Threxian continued. "Not to control, but to guide. Not to force, but to support. Thank you." Similar stories emerged over the following weeks. Parents from different species reported better relationships with their children after attending Jiwoo's sessions. Station staff noticed fewer behavioral incidents among young beings. The atmosphere throughout Harmony Point felt calmer, more connected. Dal, Baum, and Hanul became ambassadors in their own way. They played with children from other species, demonstrating that differences did not matter. They showed other young beings how to organize, how to problem solve, how to work together. Other parents watched and learned. One afternoon, Jiwoo found the cubs teaching a young Karathi how to build a simple nest. They gathered soft materials and arranged them carefully, chirping instructions. The Karathi child, who had been crying and lonely, settled into the nest and smiled for the first time in days. They learned from the best, Hyejin said, watching from nearby. She had become a regular visitor, often bringing supplies or just spending time with Jiwoo and the cubs. They learned from instinct, Jiwoo said. I just didn't get in the way. That's the skill, Hyejin replied. Knowing when to help and when to step back. Most beings struggle with that their entire lives. The day came when Vethra and Kolvin had to return to their homeworld. They would take the cubs with them, of course. Dal, Bam, and Hanul needed to continue their education among their own kind. Jiwoo knew this was coming, but it still hurt. He had gotten used to waking up with 3 small bodies pressed against him. He had gotten used to their chirping and their colorful fur and their constant need for attention. The night before they left, the cubs built one final nest. This time it was smaller and simpler, made from materials Jiwoo could keep. They worked together like always, testing stability and adjusting positions until everything felt right. When they finished, Dal chirped and gestured for Jiwoo to sit in it. He did, and immediately felt the warmth and comfort they had designed. The cubs curled around him, their fur glowing soft blue in the dim light. I'm going to miss you, Jiwoo said quietly. His voice shook slightly. The cubs made sad sounds, their colors shifting to darker shades. But underneath the sadness, Jiwoo saw other colors too. Love, gratitude, connection that would not fade with distance. You will always be family, Vethra said from the doorway. Distance changes nothing. The bond you formed is real and permanent. The next morning, Jiwoo stood in the departure bay and watched the cubs board their transport ship. Dal turned back 3 times, chirping goodbye. Bam pressed against his leg one last time. Hanul cried, and Jiwoo had to wipe his own eyes. They will remember you always, Kolvin promised, and we will return to visit. This is not an ending. After they left, Jiwoo returned to his quarters. They felt empty without the cubs. Too quiet, too organized. He sat in the small nest they had built and let himself feel the loss. But loss meant something had mattered. Something had been real and valuable and worth missing. 3 days later, Commander Park called him to her office again. This time a family stood waiting. Not Velthrin, but Dravik, a species Jiwoo had never interacted with much. 2 adults and a small child who hid behind their legs. This is the Reeve family, Commander Park explained. They just arrived on station. Their daughter Kessa is having trouble adjusting. She's scared of everything and everyone. They heard about you and asked specifically if you could help. Jiwoo looked at the small Dravik child. She had gray skin and large eyes that watched him fearfully. She reminded him of how Dal, Bam, and Hanul had looked when they first hid in the ventilation system. I'm not a professional caretaker, Jiwoo said, repeating the words he always said. No, Commander Park agreed. But you understand something important. You understand that patience and respect work with any species. Will you try? Jiwoo knelt down slowly, making himself smaller and less threatening. He did not reach toward Kessa or speak directly to her. He simply pulled out a small toy from his pocket, something the cubs had left behind, and began playing with it quietly. After a few minutes, Kessa peeked around her parent's leg. She watched Jiwoo with curious eyes. He continued playing, humming softly under his breath, the same low sound he used to make when the cubs were scared. Kessa took one small step forward. Then another. Jiwoo smiled slightly but did not look directly at her. He just kept playing, giving her space to approach at her own pace. She reached out one gray hand and touched the toy. Jiwoo let her take it. She examined it carefully, then made a sound that might have been a laugh. Her parents looked shocked. She has not laughed since we left our homeworld, her mother whispered. Jiwoo finally looked at Kessa. Hello, he said quietly. My name is Jiwoo. Would you like to play together? She nodded, still holding the toy. Okay, Jiwoo said. Let's start there. Over the following months, Jiwoo helped many families. Each situation was different, but the approach remained the same. Patience, respect, understanding that fear needed time to heal.